for sparing your precious time to join us. I'm Tanmi Moon, a youth volunteer for the GIC talk team. Before the talk begins, please either turn off your cell phones or switch them to silent mode. Well, I suppose that many of you would know big cities in America, such as New York, Boston, Los Angeles, and so on. Well then, what do you know about suburban areas of America? I guess most of us, including myself, are not aware of them. Well, today's speaker, Furlane, is going to give us a lecture entitled American Suburbs, the Good, the Bad, the Ugly. To say more about our speaker, Furlane, he's from the USA and he graduated from college with a degree in political science and electronics engineering. He spent most of his life near Chicago and now he's here with us. Let's welcome our speaker with a big round of applause.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd just like to thank Lewa for inviting me to do a GIC lecture. You have to forgive me if I'm a little bit nervous. It's the first time I've been on this end of the lecture. I usually sit in the back comfortably and watch. So, but I hope you enjoy the talk, and I look forward to giving an informative lecture. Okay, first I became interested in the American suburbs in the mid-1990s. When I originally graduated from high school, I had to go to work in order to save money to prepare for college. And some of the jobs that I took allowed me to travel throughout the Chicago suburbs and to view a large part of the city. Here is a picture of Chicago. This is Lake Michigan. This is Chicago City proper. And here's kind of a ring of all the major suburbs, and then the outer suburbs. I was born out here, and I worked here and here. Some of the jobs I did, including just basic construction work and housing. They would basically take a field, plow it, put in foundations, and put up houses, sometimes in as quick as a month. Other jobs I worked included installing storm doors and windows. As houses aged, they replaced the windows and storm doors. So a lot of these areas needed that kind of work. And then I've also worked in landscaping. One of the things about the suburbs is that most homeowners don't do their own landscaping. They don't do their own construction. They typically hire people to do that. So working these jobs gave me the opportunity to just travel outside of my hometown into all of these areas and to get a new perspective on what is one of the most popular urban, I should say, suburban living arrangements in the United States. So as of 2000, 50% of the American people live in the suburbs, while the other percentage of the people are divided between the major cities and the countryside, with the majority being in the major cities. Now, the United States is very vast, maybe similar to Australia and Canada. There's plenty of room to expand. There's plenty of room for farming, and there's plenty of room for what we call urban sprawl. And this map kind of shows you what that sprawl looks like. It kind of begins with just an inner ring, and then it just gradually keeps spreading outward and outward and outward. There's nothing out here except cornfields. So if they can run streets and gas and electricity out to here, they will just keep expanding and expanding and expanding. My community was just a regular working class community for probably 75 years. Small homes, small neighborhoods, and during the 1990s that all changed. What happened is we had our own version of suburban sprawl in which the houses started to grow and we planned developments even further out from the city of Chicago. So that's how I became interested in this topic of suburbia. Another reason was that when I went to school, especially college, I realized I was different from some of the other kids. The main categories in the United States are typically European, African American, and Mexican American are the top three peoples in the United States. So within the quote white community or Northern European community, there's a division within that for kids who grew up in maybe working class neighborhoods and kids who grew up in regular suburbs and kids who grew up in suburban sprawl. And I noticed there was differences in characteristics between how we think, how we view the world, and our exposure to the world. So it is one of the issues that I want to look at later on in this speech. So today I'm going to look at what was originally good about the suburbs, why it became bad, and what made it ugly, and why there's such a backlash against it today. So first, let's begin with what's good about the suburbs. This is kind of your quintessential picture of a 1950s white suburban family. Mom, dad, children, very happy, very close-knit family. Some people refer to it as the nuclear family. It kind of represents the growing middle class post-World War II. After World War II, the United States found itself pretty much alone in terms of wealth, industrial output, and military capacity. Even though the Soviet Union was a primary competitor, it was mostly military competition involving weapons and space. The Soviets never really competed with us in terms of farming and housing and urban development. So we had this very unique middle-class environment called the suburbs. And many people originally who were living in the city viewed the city as something for people who were exceptionally wealthy or exceptionally poor. So the middle class who wanted to have larger families, a home in the country, wanted things to be quiet, to get away from pollution, noise, traffic congestion, moved to this new living environment called the suburbs. Here's an example. Go back a little bit. Here's an example of another suburb, suburban family. Maybe I think late 1960s. Again, you have the suburban home. You have the boat, go fishing on weekends. You have the traditional boats, not Volkswagen, station wagon, where you could take the kids camping. And you could travel long distances in the United States. You can go to the beach. Maybe if you live near the coast, you could take your family. You got the dog. And typically 3 kids, some families as many as 4 to 8 children, depending on maybe their religious beliefs or views of the family. But this is kind of average. Again, another picture of maybe the classic idea of the 1950s American suburban family. This is probably late 40s, early 50s. And this is early conceptions of the suburbs. Small homes, auto-dependent. Okay? And this is a picture of the United States. This is just kind of a breakdown of the United States sections. The South, Midwest, Southwest, West Coast. The reason I wanted to put this in here is just to show how big the United States is. Korea is roughly the size of Indiana or Illinois. I think you can fit Korea maybe inside the state of Illinois. So the United States is about 12 to 15 Koreas across in width. So living in the Midwest, you'd have to travel maybe 12 hours to get to the ocean, or 18 to 24 hours to get to the ocean. But if you notice, one of the key ingredients to producing suburbs was the highway system, first instituted by President Eisenhower after World War II, and what it allowed us to do was travel anywhere in the country. If you had a car, you could put your wife and kids in the car, plan a vacation. You could go to Yellowstone, you could go to Miami, you could go to Los Angeles, you could go to New York. There were plenty of places to travel to in the United States, all by major highway system. So instead of being bound in the cities and being able to only take transportation within the city, in the 1950s you were now able to travel anywhere in the United States. And other than Australia and maybe Canada, this is one of the few countries in the world where you have this vast space connected by this many highways. That's okay. And we'll just leave that there for a moment. So originally, what was good about the suburbs is that it was safe. It was away from the pollution of the city. It was away from the traffic congestion of the city. And it was good for families. If you wanted to get married and raise children in the United States, if you were a middle class, and if you had a middle class income, the suburbs is where you wanted to go. And that's where people went. Some people believe that it's artificial, that maybe just people moved there because of the highways, and that the cities at the time were more attractive, but I don't think the data or the evidence supports that. People moved there because they wanted to move there. They thought it was a good living environment, and initially it was. The problem is that it was difficult to foresee at the time that the American suburbs were contingent on several key factors. One was low gas prices. Gas used to cost as low as 10 cents a gallon at one point. And even when it was around $1 a gallon, that's still not a lot of money. You could fill up your inefficient car and just drive anywhere. It was no difficulty at all. It didn't take a lot out of your income. It was cheaper than traveling by jet. So the suburbs really worked because you had low gas prices. Another reason the suburbs worked was the nuclear family. Women primarily stayed home during the 1950s. There is some debate as to how happy they were or were not. Some people believe they were totally unhappy. Some people believe they were very happy and there were no problems. The truth is probably somewhere in between. It depends on what a woman wants and what she wants to choose in life. But primarily, in the 1950s, women stayed home. They took care of the children. They educated the children. And most importantly, they cooked for the family. Now today, that's kind of looked down upon. The idea that if a woman would stay home and cook for the family, it's considered a lesser career path. But as I'll talk about later, it was the weak link, one of the weak links in the chain of the suburbs. If your mom's not cooking and your dad's working, where does the food come from? Where are you going to eat predominantly? And you'll see the rise of a whole industry that catered to that specific need. And now we're kind of seeing the consequences of that step in our modern day. And I'll talk about that later. Another key ingredient that made the suburbs good after World War II was that it was an engine of growth. And they're talking about China kind of repeating the same process right now. And Korea, I think, has already done it and is in the process of doing it. But for every home you build, it requires that much more lumber. It requires someone to build roads. It requires someone to put in a gas line, electricity. And then when that family moves into that house, well, what do? They buy beds, they buy paintings, they buy televisions, they buy refrigerators, they buy stoves. So imagine, in 1950, the population of the United States was about 140 million. So imagine 50 million of those people moving into the suburbs, and that many people buying that many refrigerators, that many beds, that many children's toys, that many more cars because they want to be independent. It's a lot of money, great for the economy, great for industry, great for factories, keeps people working. So those three ingredients was really what made the suburbs work. They were engines of growth. There was a strong nuclear family, and oil prices were low. That's what made the suburbs good, and I would say probably for a good 25 years, these three factors stayed in place, and the suburbs were healthy, happy places for families to grow up, for people to live and to enjoy what we would generally refer to as the American dream. Home, 2 cars, white picket fence, kids playing in the backyard, local schools, playgrounds, and if you want to travel anywhere, you can get in your car and go to the art museum in the city. If you want to go see the ocean, you can go there. If you want to go to Disney World, you can get your family, put them in the station wagon, and travel to Disney World. So that's what was good about the suburbs. And then the bad. These are pictures of highway development gone crazy. I hope this never happens in Korea. Maybe it's already here. If I could be on the urban planning department in Gwangju or Seoul, I would just tell them, do not do this. Make people live in cities, make people walk. Use this for buses, not cars. Make this high-speed rail, do anything with it, but make it a car-dominant atmosphere. So when you look at this, and you see this highway system spreading out across the nation and converging in cities, what you get is traffic congestion, pollution, and what was initially a short commute from your suburban home to the city that was low stress has become a long commute that is high stress and keeps you away from your family. So maybe in the beginning, Dad enjoyed his commute to the city. He went in the morning, he worked 8 hours, he drove home. His commute maybe lasted no more than 30 minutes on an open, clear highway. Very safe traffic driving, very safe roads, no congestion. All of that changed. The reason it changed is because the United States population changed. We went from 10 million people at the end of World War II to 210 million people by 1970. So you're looking at a doubling of the population, and the majority of those people moved into the suburbs. So the suburban population went from, say, 35% of the United States, gradually increased to 50% of the United States. So the suburb no longer is this quiet, low congestion place where people could just relax, they could commute easily to work, where the pollution level was low. It suddenly became this congested, stress-inducing environment where to get out of here, you had to get on here to go wherever it is you're going. And if the traffic is like this, I don't know what time of day this was, but it looks very low. It's probably not rush hour traffic or evening traffic. It's very low. If the traffic stayed like this, it would be bearable. But it still wouldn't take away from the fact that this takes up so much space and it separates these communities. Everything's just separated. You can't walk from here to here. You can't walk from here to here. You can't get there from there. It's impossible. You will die. So the one factor that made the suburbs bad was an increase in traffic brought on by an increase in population and an increase in commute time. And you say, well, what's the problem with commute time? People like their cars. Americans have 100 different car designs to choose from. You can get cars with leather seats. You can get cars with sunroofs. You can get cars with that are sporty, SUVs. You can get any kind of car you want in the United States. Pink, green, yellow, blue, whatever. People like their cars. So what's wrong with getting in your car in the morning and commuting to work? Well, you're just alone. it's just you in your bubble machine, listening to the radio, trapped in your car for 1 to 2 hours, sometimes up to 3 to 4 hours a day. My younger brother commutes an hour and a half to work and an hour and a half from work every day. He lives in the suburbs, and this is a problem during holidays because he's chosen one living environment, and I've actively ran away from that living environment, so our discussions during Christmas and Thanksgiving are sometimes a little bit difficult. But someday I want to encourage my younger brother to leave the suburbs. Yeah, an hour and a half to Chicago and an hour and a half back every single day, 5 days a week. Very stressful. He's been in 2 car accidents already. Increases your car insurance, increases gas consumption. And studies have shown that if you take away this environment and you have people work in their own communities, they travel less and they use less oil, which leads to less pollution and less CO2. So when we think of CO2 and climate change, I think one of the chief culprits is China. They have the most coal-burning plants, they have the most pollution, they're going through this rapid period of development. I think anyone who's been to China has experienced a high pollution day. If you have asthma, I wouldn't recommend going on those particular days. But that's one of the leading causes of CO2 emissions, carbon monoxide, and various other pollutants in the area is from congestion, traffic congestion, and this pushing people out of the city and making them travel back and forth from the suburbs to the city in order to work. It's a serious component of climate change. Whether you believe in global climate change or just local climate change, either way it's a factor. I know local climate change maybe is more readily felt. Guangzhou, for example, I notice is hotter. If I travel outside the city, the temperature drops about 10 degrees. And a lot of that has to do with the mountains and the wind not being able to blow the heat out. But a lot of it has to do with pavement, buildings, and everything that the heat of the sun absorbs and then reflects back into the atmosphere. So you can see local climate change here in Guangzhou. All right, so that's one of the difficulties with the suburbs going bad is increase in pollution, increase in American population, increase in commute times, which take people away from their families. They're very stressful, and in harsh winters, when road conditions are bad, they can even be very dangerous. I don't have the latest data, but the number of traffic deaths in the United States exceeds 30,000 per year. So if that happened because we were going to war, there would be a huge outrage. People would be protesting in Washington, D.C. every day. But 30,000 people dying every year in traffic accidents, and nobody really says anything. We accept it as a fact of life, that a person died in a car accident. My friend's mom died in a car accident, or a boy crossing the road was hit by a car. It's sad, it's tragic, but never makes the news. It's just a big statistic that's ignored. And it's all because of this type of planning. When you keep people in their communities, they travel less on the highway, they walk more, there's less conflict between automobiles and pedestrians. So that is one problem that needs to be addressed about the American suburbs. Another problem is, and I'll try to move quickly, is racism. The majority of people who moved to the suburbs initially were white. Okay, and this is a typical big suburban house. Oh, you can go to the next one, that's okay. Here's a picture of suburban sprawl. I believe this is in Las Vegas. Oh, you can go back. And so everyone's got their own pool, their own cul-de-sac, cookie-cutter houses, and they're kind of ringed off by various trees and highways, probably out here, which surround the community. But this is affordable only for a certain group of people. You don't see inner city people coming out into the suburbs, at least for the first 50 years of the suburbs. They were trapped by highways, sometimes on purpose. They were put in housing projects, and many of them are still there today. It was a big problem for the African American community. And it's still a difficult problem today because although America is a multiracial society, we believe in cultural diversity, our culture, the suburban culture and the movies and music and television that surrounds that suburban culture is very closes people out. You either have to adopt that culture or you have to stay in your own community. So if you're Mexican American, say, and you immigrate to the United States, you want to become part of the American dream, there's a kind of a unwritten rule that you're going to adapt some of the aspects of white society, which means the suburbs, college life, the music. And a lot of people are saying no to that. They're staying in their communities. They're maintaining their language, their culture. They're not assimilating in that fashion because I think it's unfair. I wouldn't want people coming to America feeling like they had to listen to Lady Gaga and move to the suburbs and eat Twinkies or whatever silly notions that have cropped out of the American dream that it's become. All right, another thing that has caused the suburbs to become bad is the breakdown of the family. Americans have challenged the traditional notion of the nuclear family. Women are more independent, they're getting degrees, they're going to work, they're not staying home to take care of the kids. They're sending them to school, they're hiring a nanny, they're getting their aunt or their grandmother to raise the children. That's pretty much the standard pattern. So kids are growing up in huge homes, essentially separated from their parents for about 16 to 22 hours of every day because you're sleeping for 8 hours and you're working 8 to 10 hours and you're commuting 2 to 5 hours. So you're either on the phone with your kids or you're just not seeing them until the end of the day. Someone else is raising the American children and it's not the parents. And it's just something we have to wrestle with in the future. But when you take away the nuclear family, no one's at home cooking. It's the weak link that has given ride to the American fast food industry. Somebody has to stay home and cook good, healthy food. If they don't, what you have is a generation of children who have eaten high salt, high sugar, high fat food because it's quick, it's convenient, and mom and dad don't have time to cook anymore. You end up with kids who are obese. Some people think it's caused attention deficit disorder. Some people even speculate it leads to other problems like birth defects, autism, drug use. You know, the science is still out on it, and you can't point to anything specific where you could say, you know, this causes this, but it's definitely something that has to be looked at. People who eat at home with their family, they're healthier, they eat healthier food, it has less salt in it, it has less sugar in it, you're not eating on the fly, and you're not developing these habits that lead to an obesity rate that is now at 50% in the United States. So 65% of Americans are overweight a little bit, 40 to 50% are considered obese. I'm very fortunate. I come from a thin family. I'm always active. I've never been, no one in my family has been very heavy or imposing. Even though we're Italian, we eat a lot of pizza, a lot of lasagna, but we burn it off working. But if you're from another ethnic minority group, one of the statistics shows that African American women especially have been hit hard by this change in the American diet, and other women from other nationalities also. I think women more than men, but men increasingly so. The more you sit in your car, sit in your office, and sit in your home watching TV because you're trapped there in this suburban environment, you can exercise 10 times a week, it doesn't matter because you're sitting. That's all you do is sit. You're not walking to the subway, you're not riding your bicycle, you're not walking to play soccer with your friends or play baseball. You're not out, you're not active. So that key change in the American nuclear family has led to a host of health problems, and I don't think we know how to solve it yet. I would hope Obamacare could address the issue, but I think even President Obama has mentioned that it can't just be the healthcare system, it has to be healthcare prevention and healthcare maintenance as well. It can't just be having good insurance. That's not going to make you healthy. The people themselves have to change their habits. And I think one of those habits is getting rid of this as quickly as possible. Okay, the ugly. I'm going to speak real quickly here. Okay, this is what it looks like in a subprime mortgage disaster world. All the homes are empty and they're for sale, except maybe this one on the corner. In 2008, and leading up to 2008, greedy American bankers and several other factors contributed to giving money to people who didn't have the jobs to pay back that money. I, with my low income, could have qualified for a $250,000 loan. And it was getting so ridiculous at some point that they were doing no income verification for these big loans to buy these houses. And so for about maybe 10 years, people saw this bubble. They call it the housing bubble. All this money is going into the community. They're just giving money away, literally, saying, you want a house, you want the American dream, you want to live in the suburbs and have all the fun that these people are having, we'll give you the money to do that. And it took advantage of poor people, they took advantage of African American people, they took advantage of working class people. And they gave them this money for houses that they couldn't afford to pay the heating bills on, they couldn't afford to pay someone to cut the grass, and they couldn't afford to make their mortgage payment because they lost their jobs or their job just wasn't paying enough. So you get the 2008 subprime mortgage disaster, which affected the entire planet because they repackaged these debts into hedge funds, and these hedge funds were tied to China, they were tied to Greece, they were tied to Spain, Italy, everywhere. So when it collapsed, when this bubble popped, the whole world was affected. It was a disaster. So I hope this never happens again. But this is what you have in America. Vast swaths of suburban homes that are empty and for sale, and no one's going to buy them for years to come. Homogenous culture. I couldn't find a picture to really capture it, but I think it's as close as I can get. This is a popular show in the United States, and as you'll notice, it's all white people. So the point of bringing this up is that because the suburbs are so isolated, they create a homogenous culture. The music, the movies, the television shows, there's no Mexican Americans here, no Asian Americans, no African Americans. It's just these kind of college-bound, graduate, wealthy, upper-class kids who never worked a blue-collar job. They don't know where the streets come from. They don't know where the roads, houses, electricity, gas, they don't know where all the labor-intensive things that they enjoy. They don't know where it comes from. People have to build this environment in order for them to be happy. Unfortunately, it's just too uniform. It doesn't represent America. This person should be black, this person should be Mexican, this person should be Asian, and that would be a better representation. You know, if the television show incorporated that, that would have been great, I think. And then show maybe somebody going to work at McDonald's in order to pay their tuition bills, or going to work, you know, doing something labor intensive in order to pay their bills. So another problem is drug use. Marijuana, heroin, methamphetamines, and designer drugs and pharmaceutical drugs. Americans consume the most drugs on the planet. It's a huge crisis. It's kind of under the radar. We don't like to talk about it. Korea is recently dealing with the problem of American soldiers, maybe some American teachers, I don't know, but they're bringing drugs in through the mail. The Korean mail system is starting to scan the drugs coming in. They use drug-sniffing dogs, and so a lot of the Americans who are coming here, they have these habits. They come to Korea, and they have to continue these habits. So it's something that Korea has to keep out. It could be a very detrimental factor in the development of Korean society. You don't need pharmaceutical drugs all the time. It is not the answer to all of your problems. In America, every time someone is sick, worried, depressed, they immediately run to the pill box. And a lot of these drugs have not been tested thoroughly. There's a lot of side effects that are worse than the actual cure. You get addictions, and again, you get more breakdown of societies. So it's very problematic. A lot of my friends that I grew up with, some of them experimented with this, they quit. Some of them continue to do it because they're under a lot of stress. Maybe their parents are divorced, maybe they can't find a job. And this kind of offers itself as a solution, which is kind of sad. They should look for other alternative means to cope with the problems of American society. Okay, so what made the American suburb go ugly? Drug use, the subprime mortgage bubble, which collapsed housing prices and left a lot of people in debt, cheated a lot of Americans and nearly ruined the world economy, and definitely weakened the American economy for years to come. Cultural homogeneity, where the suburbs are predominantly white even today. It doesn't allow people to interact with other nationalities. So, for example, when people come here to Korea, maybe they've never interacted with anyone from Asia ever in their life except seeing something in the movies. So there's this adjustment period where they're trying to understand the new culture. All right, and then quickly, in contrast, Korea. I have one photo of Korea. There's more suburban sprawl. Here's downtown. I believe this is downtown Gwangju, downtown Itaewon, and Seoul. What you see is a lot of people walking. Americans are just now rediscovering this, and they're actively trying to reintroduce this model into all of their cities. And just this past year, the urban planners in New York City took Times Square and redeveloped it for people instead of cars. So you'll see more chairs out there, you'll see more places for people to sit, talk, drink coffee, and they're kind of pushing back against an automobile culture where you constantly have to watch out for cars running over your feet and knocking you down and killing you. So America is trying to reintroduce this everywhere. And there's going to be some push and pull. Maybe some people don't want it, but I think this is more healthy than other aspects of urban planning, which lead people to constantly be in their car. Here you have to actually interact with people. You have to look at people. Maybe you'll get to know the person who runs this shop. You go there maybe once a month to buy something, and you get to meet them and speak with them. Maybe you get to meet people on the street, say hello. You get to go with your friends. It's a social experience. It's a human experience. In contrast, the suburban experience I don't believe is necessarily people-friendly. It's not pedestrian-friendly. It's not human-friendly. So Korea has this strength, and I hope they keep it. Wide sidewalks, make them even wider. Trees, local shops owned by small business owners. And one of the benefits of this environment is that it's people-friendly. So just in short, after World War II, the United States adopted a living model called the suburbs, the American dream. It worked because there were low gas prices, there was less pollution, less congestion, and it was a good engine for the American economy. What went wrong is that the American population increased, it became auto-focused instead of people-focused, oil prices went up, the nuclear family broke down, crime rose, problems within American society, and its financial structure rose, which make other parts of the world better places to live. Thank you very much.